So you can't hit what you're aiming at. You're right. It's probably your sights. But maybe not. Today we're discussing optics versus iron sights. What's up, journeyers? Welcome back. My favorite gluttons of punishment here for some more knowledge abuse. I am Damien, your wildly modest host, and today we're going to be talking about iron sights versus optics. Not necessarily which one's better or worse. That's going to be up to you to decide, but this should be somewhat of a comprehensive list, at least to the different sight pictures and advantages to each. And if you didn't know, all of us over here at the Concealed Journey are North Dakota boys, so we've got to ask, if the tallest building in your town is the grain elevator over by the train tracks, go ahead and blast that like button. Please consider subscribing to the channel. It does wonders for us over here at the Concealed Journey. And get down in that comment section. Let us know what you got to say about your experience with optics versus iron sights, and which ones do you find more beneficial to your shooting style. Whether for you, that's going to be iron sights potentially. Maybe you find that iron sights are your preferred sighting system. Here is an M9A3 made by Beretta. Gorgeous gun, absolutely. Now these are iron sights. Now these have tritium inserts. This is going to be traditional 3-dot with the tritium advantage in them. Whereas like over here on this M9A1, these are going to be 3 dots but no night sight insert in those as well. Over here we've got some Ameriglow Spartans. This is going to be high vis orange front with blacked out rear. And then over here, which is the Versus, this is the opponent to the discussion today, and that's going to be running with an optic on it. Now here, I still have iron sights, high vis front orange. These are Trijicon HDs, but the focus here being the 507C, or in other cases, other optics that you may be familiar with or accustomed to, is going to be Leupold Delta Point, Trijicon RMR. Let's go with Vortex Venom potentially, or Sig Romeo is another good offering as well. Tons of different options on the market. By all means, pick one for your handgun with the durability that you appreciate, or what's most affordable to you by chance. That's most likely going to be the Hollow Sun or the Vortex line. The Trijicons, the Delta Points, the Sigs, those get up into like that $500, $600 area. Let's go into this assuming that you don't know yet. You don't know which one's going to be best for you. Maybe it's just going to be some super stock 3-dot iron sights, or maybe you do happen to like that high vis front orange, like over here on this Glock 45 with a blacked out rear and high vis front. Maybe that's going to be your flavor. Or you've got aging eyes, or you've got cross-eye dominance issues, astigmatism. That's where an optic is really going to come in handy for you. Like I said, as a redundancy, I've got backup iron sights on here, and I still have that front orange. In my own personal experience, I've found that I really appreciate having a fiber optic front and a blacked out rear. That makes for some really great target shooting. Obviously, it's a huge preference in the competition market, but the downside of fiber optic sights is that there is no low to no light advantage with those sights. When you turn on a flashlight, if you carry a handgun with a weapon light, you're only going to get a silhouetted sight picture. You're not going to be able to see that fiber optic front, blacked out rear. Everything's going to be blacked out, and it's just going to be a silhouette of sights in front of your target. Whereas an advantage with something like these TFOs, these are made by TrueGlow. These have a high-vis front ring in the front, but they're also tritium and fiber optic. So you're getting that advantage as well. Moving on to a similarity using an optic, this one is auto-adjusting to ambient light around it. You can set it to having it on manual mode, so you're always going to be adjusting the brightness of it, whether you're inside all day, so you're going to turn the brightness down, or you're about to walk outside, you can reach in here and just boop, 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 and crank that brightness up. Even though, like I mentioned, my preference, or at least an appreciation for fiber optic sights comes in with daylight shooting, the downside is low to no light, and low to no light is typically the setting for a situation where you're going to be needing your carry firearm. I have found that if it's range theatrics only, then fiber optic front is going to be awesome for that. Also, the narrower the front post is, the more I appreciate it as well. Similar, like as a reference, is going to be the Trijicon XRs, which I have on my Glock 43, but that front post is narrower, so lends itself to a little bit more precise application. I also enjoy shooting with an optic though, and I only have one handgun with an optic on it, and it definitely makes a significant improvement for really precise shooting, not so much reflexive shooting, but certainly precise shooting. It definitely lends you to have the ability to make more accurate shots at distance, which is a nice thing. I mean, obviously handguns are mostly considered a close range firearm, whether that's really up close and personal, immediate proximity, out to 25 yards or so. After that, I think you'd probably start appreciating to have something along these lines, a carbine in whatever caliber you find to be appropriate. But moving on from that, maybe you are the kind of person that thinks, you know what, you don't need sights, we're just going to point shoot everything. I don't entirely agree with that. I think having sights on handguns are the bee's knees, if you will. I think they're super important, and you should absolutely use your sights when firing. But what it's going to come down to is your own personal preference. I spent a couple hours the other day doing some dry fire and actually just working on sight picture and sight alignment specifically. I wasn't so much focusing on just the draw or just my transitions from silhouette to silhouette. I was really focusing on, I had a bunch of different handguns out, all with different sighting options. Some of them being like, I've got some blacked out suppressor height sights on one of my slides. I've got those fiber optic sights on another slide, and then I've got this one with an optic, whatever, and then I've got those XRs in my 43. I was practicing with all of them and really trying to find out which one I drew with the fastest, the one I just naturally performed better with, and it actually turned out to be that red fiber optic front with the blacked out rear that I've got on my two-tone. And that was something that I kind of wish I didn't figure out to be the truth. I was really hoping, yep, by all hands and accounts, this thing was going to be my absolute advantage, but it really didn't turn out to be that way. I was still like second or third best running the optic. Maybe it's because I don't have as much time practicing with the dot. This is a little bit, I've only been carrying with an optic for about 8 months now. But to play devil's advocate against myself is I actually have the most experience shooting these Trijicon HDs. I've been running Trijicon HDs for years now, and the one handgun that I have is actually my Glock 26 that has Trijicon HDs on it, and only, there's no optic on that one, and I actually wasn't as proficient with the HDs the other day. So that's going to take some practice on your behalf, and maybe you don't have the luxury of having 5 different guns that you can sit down with and compare and compare and compare, because maybe you're a new gun owner or you don't own a gun at all. One thing that I would advocate is speak with your peers. You know, ask some friends to borrow their guns. You know, just going through, just actually pick up every gun and just aim it and point it and see which one comes more naturally to you. How does your front eye draw to, how does your eye draw to that front sight? Which will lead us into another talking point about iron sights versus optics, is going to be where you actually focus. So if you're going to be shooting with a handgun that has iron sights only, your primary focus is actually going to be the front sight. I think it seems a little counterintuitive that you aren't going to be focusing at your target, but the way it should be is, if you could follow me with this, right, that I do all the time, right? So these are your rear sights for you, and this is your front sight. As you shoot at this target, if I'm the target and these are your sights, you actually need to be focusing right here, whereas your rear sights are going to be blurry and your target is going to be blurry. Where in the case with using an optic on a handgun, you focus on the target and you just superimpose the dot over top of your target. Both eyes should be open, whether you're shooting with iron sights or with an optic. That's one thing I think lends itself to being a better pistol shooter, is shooting with both eyes open. It does take, from what I've heard from other people that I've spoken with, and something that I experienced a little bit when I first started shooting, I suppose, is typically people will close that one eye and they'll just look downrange. One thing that reduces is actually your depth perception, is your association to the distance to your target, as well as at occluding your peripheral vision and situational awareness, which is something you should always be considerate of, is what's going on around you. So shooting with both eyes open, iron sights or optics, the optics gives you an advantage of actually focusing at your target downrange. I don't have to focus at something 18 inches in front of my face with my right eye and focus at something that's 20 feet away with my left eye. Both eyes just focus downrange, and you just put that dot right in front of your target while you're looking downrange. That's definitely an advantage to that. Now, one disadvantage we could say with using an optic on a handgun, or even a long gun, a carbine of any sort, is that in the situation that you may be deploying your firearm, it's most likely going to be pretty intense. I was in a close call one time, and the adrenaline's going a little bit. One thing that can end up happening if you have an optic is what people call or consider getting stuck in your optic, right? Where if I'm presenting this gun, all I'm ever doing is using this window as my aperture, and everything else closes in, that tunnel vision that so many folks refer to when it comes to like an emergency situation or a heightened sense of threat or awareness, where you're just going to draw in with that tunnel vision and you may get stuck in your optic. Whereas typically, if you're using iron sights, in a threat situation, most often you're not going to revert back to focusing on that front sight still. You're going to be threat focusing. You're going to be looking at that bozo that's 5 yards away from you and what he's doing. What are his hands doing? What's his body language like? You're going to be looking at him and you're going to be paying attention to his actions. You're not going to be focusing on that front sight. So in a threatful situation, you're most likely not going to be focusing in front of you anyway, but I've heard accounts that people get stuck in their optic if you're running an optic, whereas you don't really have that pitfall with iron sights. You're not going to get stuck in your iron sights. Typically, you're actually going to completely just bypass your sights and threat focus downrange anyway. Now, obviously, that can still translate over to the optic. Maybe you're just going to be shooting over your optic, and that's where, I kind of satirically referred to, you don't need sights anyway, just point shoot everything. You shouldn't do that. You shouldn't do that. You should practice with the fundamentals of a proper sight picture, proper sight alignment every time, equal height, equal light, as far as that front sight is concerned, with its correlation inside of your rear sight. But it still stands to say that in a situation where it's right now and the fight is on, you're most likely going to just be looking at that guy, and the muscle memory of it is going to be coming into play. If you're experienced enough, if you close your eyes, I can close my eyes, I can draw my gun, and I can press out and aim at something, a silhouette target at 5 yards, and I'll be on body at least, because I've built in these reps, I've burned these into my brain, that this muscle memory, this form, this fit, this feel, all comes together appropriately, and that's going to get me close. And those are the things that play into a threat situation. There's a lot of debate and controversy out there about gross and fine motor skills. We're not here to talk about that today, and I'm no scientist. I haven't studied human biology to know how the body reacts or how the brain reacts to those situations. There's plenty of other accounts elsewhere. Please resource those things independently. Moving on, advantages or disadvantages, or maybe that's not even what we're discussing, just attributes about iron sights versus attributes of an optic. One thing is going to be cost, which I think is relative. So that set of iron sights that I have on my two-tone, they're the fiber optic front with the blacked out rear, those are like $60 on Amazon. Whereas if you're going to get into the optics game, this one here is a Holosun 507, which I think lends itself to being one of the most affordable options on the market, with a great review backing. There's great pedigree from the community on Holosun at this point in time. Whereas sure, there are other more affordable, wouldn't say cheaper, but maybe cheaper, optics out there, but they don't quite have the pedigree that like Holosun has built for themselves in the affordable zone of optics, right? A little bit less than that would be something like an AIM Sports optic, I suppose you get into. I think Riton or whatever is doing a fair job, just to name another one anyways. Holosun and like a Vortex Venom, those are going to be optics that are going to be in that mid-range $300 to $500 area. That's going to get you set up with an optic for a handgun. Above that, next tier, if you want to talk about things that are going to be maybe even double the price of that's going to be like a Trijicon RMR, SRO, Leupold Delta Point, or Leopold, whatever. That's going to be that range. SIG makes some optics that kind of vary between both of those tiers as well. So you have a significant price difference going from iron sights that are probably going to cost you $60 to $150, like the Trijicon HDs, my preference, those are about $150. Now you jump in twice that price just to get into a 507C, and then twice that once again to get into an RMR, SRO, Delta Point, unless you've got, you know, great resources for accessing those optics. If you've got dealer programs or you've got discount codes, obviously. Big Daddy Unlimited is great for getting you exceptional discounts on a ton of stuff. Just as being a member, you don't have to have military or law enforcement. You don't have to know a guy that knows a guy in the industry or anything like that. It's just a subscription to BDU, and you can get, I was looking at Type 2 RMRs and they were like $420 for that. So obviously Trijicon has made an absolutely fantastic name for reliability, durability, military, law enforcement, civilian market, all around. And that's only $120 more than this one. And I think you're getting years of pedigree, decades of pedigree with a Trijicon over a Holosun. But for the layman, Holosun is doing fantastic as well. Just to give you some other offerings anyways. I've kind of already touched on it, but another attribute of optics is how well they perform for folks that may be cross-eye dominant. Because you're shooting with both eyes open, which you should be anyway, iron sights or optic, you should be shooting with both eyes open. The advantage for somebody that's cross-eye dominant with an optic is both eyes are still focusing downrange, whereas if you are left eye dominant but a right-handed shooter, with iron sights being as the fact with iron sights you need to focus on that front sight, it's not too much trouble to just place the firearm in front of your left eye, as you see me here shooting right-handed in front of my left eye, simulating that I was cross-eye dominant. You can just shoot like this, and plenty of people do that. That's a pretty simple and fair way to overcome your cross-eye dominance. But as with an optic, you don't have to do that. You can still keep this firearm in front of your right eye, I suppose, and you're just looking through the optic at that point in time. Like when you're standing at a baseball game and you're at the chain link fence, you're looking through the fence. You don't even notice the fence, and you can see the whole field and the whole game happening. That's the same thing you're doing with an optic, is you're just looking through it. You're just putting that dot up in front of your face. Not focusing here, you're focusing there. So to close on those things, we're not necessarily saying that the optics are better than iron sights or iron sights are better than optics. There are some advantages to each, right? I mean, optics are a little bit more fail-safe than not as compared to an optic because it's electronic and it's mechanical, so therefore it's inevitably doomed to fail at some point in time, right? I mean, if Murphy's going to be around, Murphy's going to be around, and it really doesn't matter. There are a million things that could not go your way, but like we said, this isn't necessarily saying that one is better than the other. Just a little bit of a description as some things that you could consider if you're going to choose between the two. Is getting an optic on a handgun going to be worth it for you? There are a couple of other things that you may have to get lined up to have an optic on your handgun, but maybe that's for another video, another time. The most important thing is that you just train. Train, and then train some more when you're done with that. Dry fire is obviously super useful. There's another video that we have that goes into the importance, benefits, and practice of dry fire. Please refer to that video as well. Tons of information over there. Also consider getting over to theconcealedjourney.com, our website, where we have our schedule for training, as well as swag, apparel, merchandise, things of that nature. As always, seriously folks, we love you being here. We love doing this. This is an absolute joy. This is a privilege, really, and it's just so fantastic to get the feedback from you folks, seeing that people are actually engaging and that we've got a like-minded community out there, and I'm just proud to be a part of it. So thank you being a part of it here with us over at the Concealed Journey. Hope you have a great day. Be safe. Check your chambers. We'll catch you next time.